Hello and welcome to my presentation on Venus of Willendorf. We're going to start with, who is she? There have been many different variations of the Venus of Willendorf figurines. Some have been pregnant, prepubescent, male, or with detailed facial features. There are various theories on what these figures were used for, including pornographic images, images of the socially functional woman, or a peaceful goddess to worship. Since these figures are ancient, their true reason will be unknown to science, but that doesn't keep people from guessing. Now, she is generally viewed as a fertility figure. She is named after the fertility goddess Venus, and Venus was also the goddess of sex, love, and beauty. She displays over-exaggerated sex characteristics, including large hips, large breasts, and she is sometimes depicted as pregnant. Now let's look at the self-portrait hypothesis. There is a theory that some of the figures are actually self-portraits instead of fetish objects. When we look at ourselves, we see our bodies in a distorted fashion. Professor Leroy McDermott states that this distorted view is also called the lozenge perspective, which is depicted on my slide here. And this perspective shortens the legs and the feet and widens the breasts. This perspective, as seen in some of the figurines, shows how a person would view their own bodies. This theory also explains why some of the figures lack facial features, because they didn't have mirrors at the time. Sorry. Toby, stop it! This theory never held much sway in mainstream archaeologists because they claim to be cherry-picking individual figures to fit their theory. Although it is an interesting theory, there are many other figures that are proportionally accurate. In addition to that, we see that people can create self-portraits accurately without a mirror in other historic pieces of art. Skeptics recognize that the figures are likely created differently and for different reasons, but they find it hard to believe that these figures were created so differently than other Paleolithic art. Now we're moving on to idealization in art. Obesity and idealization of the human form is nothing new in the art world. The emphasis of body fat on the female form has historically been identifiers for femininity, sensuality, and fertility. And as we know, Venus is a goddess of love and beauty, the equivalent of Aphrodite if you were unsure. And figures based off Venus are generally pieces of art that represent love and beauty as well. And the figurine was actually jokingly called Venus, but the name stuck. Today, the Venus of Willendorf is a symbol of obesity and possibly metabolic syndrome. Some have considered that since this figure is from a hunter-gatherer society, many of the women would have had too little body fat to be largely fertile themselves. So it is a hypothesis that these figures are the idealization of a female figure in those hunter-gatherer societies because they need more meat to be fertile. A figure that a woman may aspire to be, but will never truly achieve. Since today we promote a size 0, especially with those disfigured Barbie dolls that we see displayed on the screen, it can be comforting to see these overweight style icons, and even if those body figures aren't the norm, it's still comforting to see somebody like yourself. Now we're going to read a poem that is about the Venus of Willendorf. I just thought it was a fun poem. Okay. She's big as a man's fist, big as a black pepper shaker filled with gray dust, like two fat glandulous bulbs grown into a burst of twilight. Lumpy and fertile, earthy, egg-shaped, she's pregnant with all the bloomy hosannas of love hunger, beautiful in a way that forces us to look at the ground. This squat Venus in her braided helmet is scarved from a hunk of limestone, shaped into blues singer. In her big smallness, she makes us kneel.